Good morning. Thank you for joining us. The regular scheduled Board of County Commission meeting is August 16th, 2022. And if we could ask for Pastor Jeff Coate of the Ocean Church to come forward for the invocation. And if we please rise. I'd also like to have a moment of silence before the invocation to recognize one of our longtime residents here. Edward Wilson died this week, and he was an icon in aviation here in Lee County for the last 80 years. He grew up here, and I remember hearing stories of him. He used to go to Pageville, the 40s, and watch the Army Corps planes play there, land there, and train there. I knew his son and went to school with his son, Ed Jr., but a great asset to Lee County and Pageville. So if we have a moment of silence for Edward. Thank you, Pastor.
Well, it's an honor to be with you this morning. And as I was praying for you all this morning, what was on my heart is that, the Lord cares about the decisions that are made, but even more than that, he cares about you. And so Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along the right paths, bringing honor to his name." So I want to pray for wisdom today, but I want to pray a blessing over you and your families because we're so thankful for you. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, we thank you for these men that are here today. And God, I pray that you would give them wisdom. Lord, give them your mind and your heart for Lee County. We ask you to fill this time today. But Lord, I know that you care more about them than the things that they will accomplish today. So I pray for blessing on their souls. God, I pray for peace, refreshing, and I pray that you would give them joy today. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
They forgot to bring it back.
Who stole our flag?
Maybe if they could put one on the screen real quick.
Sorry, we had some construction this week, and it looks like we lost our flags due to the construction. We weren't sure 2 weeks ago we'd be back in this room. We had a water leak in the ceiling out in the hallway, and we weren't sure if we would be back in here, but thanks to a lot of quick work, we were able to get back in the room. There we go. Perfect.
Yeah.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance as soon as it comes up. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. We should use that picture more often. That's actually a beautiful picture there.
Yeah, it is. Where's the old flag here?
Oh, yeah. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. And we have one celebration to recognize this morning. If I could have Deb Kamala and the group from Drug House Odyssey, and we also have honored to have Iris DeHorace with us this morning. If you please come forward, please. Any of the staff like to come up with the foundation and just meet right here at the podium. I have a resolution to read to the record. Thank you for coming down this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. As this resolution reads, whereas Trey Boston and Iris DeHorace, through the Trey Boston Belief Foundation, have shown extraordinary support for Lee County's drug-free kids. And whereas Trey Boston travels each year to Drug House Odyssey Family Night to support this 30-year event and underage drinking prevention message. Whereas Trey Boston takes the time to motivate messaging annual to the Red Ribbon Week and Drug Facts Week. And whereas Trey Boston, through the D1 Training Center, supports healthy kids through free events to the Boys and Girls Club and the other agencies serving Lee County's most population. And whereas the Beyond Belief Foundation supports Lee County families through holiday events, gift cards, and free football camps. Whereas Iris DeHorace and Trey Boston will receive the Hanley Foundation Prevention Superhero Award at the annual meeting at Drug Free Lee on August 24th at the Cape Coral Police Department. Now therefore be resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Lee County, Florida, that do hereby recognize Trey Boston and Iris D. Horace for all they do to support the local youth and their families in Lee County, duly executed this day, Cecil Pendergast. Thank you. Please come forward.
Very good. Congratulations.
I'd like to recognize Trey was not able to be here. Come on up, and this is Trey's mom, Iris, and she was able to make it here today, and Trey was not able to make it. Thank you for coming, though. We got one more picture behind you.
One more.
I got it. Never mind.
One more picture. You do one more picture. One more
more
picture. We got one for the county staff.
Squish, squish.
All right, and 1, 2, and 3. And one more.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Deb or Iris? Yeah, Iris, please.
On behalf of Trey Boston, it is a pleasure and an honor to be here with all of you today. Many do not know that Trey grew up on Bell Street off of Veronica Shoemaker when he was growing up. And throughout all that time, I've always worked in the criminal justice sector, which many people were not aware of. I was actually with pretrial before, and I worked for the Florida Highway Patrol. So he always knew to do the right thing. When he was a little boy, he used to do the VA stand-downs with me, feed at the homeless shelters, the candlelight vigils for domestic violence. And when he grew up, I did not realize that he had this further passion that he saw us doing this, because if you don't have money, make time, give back, do what you can. And with his platform, it has allowed us to be able to not only help at-risk children and families in the community, but to be able to go and look for them, because people who need help, the ones who really need help, don't come out. They sit in the back. So we go out there and we look for them. We speak at juvenile detention centers. We have the opportunity to work with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Drug Free Coalition, who allows us to use that platform to let kids know to do the right thing. Don't drink, don't drive. And even for adults, if you're gonna do it, because I'm a DUI evaluator, if you're gonna do it, be responsible. So being able to have that opportunity and to be able to have your support is truly appreciated. So thank you, and thank you to our community who allows us to work with them every day. Although I am his mother, I'm also the executive director, so I ensure that we compliance, honesty, integrity. We embody everything that we would want to see in, or people to see in us, character. So thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. I greatly appreciate it. I apologize he couldn't be here as the season has started and he is in North Carolina, but I greatly appreciate each and every one of you and our community, so thank you.
Thank you for everything you do. Thank you.
And thank you to Deb. She's amazing.
I just sent an email.
No, you do more than that, Deb, now. Well, thank you again, and thank you, Iris, for coming down. Okay, we'll move on to the recap. We have a couple items to be deferred. If I get a motion.
So moved.
Second?
We have items A2 and public hearing number 2. We have a motion with a second. Any public comment on moving items A2 and P8, public hearing 2? Come back to the board. Any discussion? Any objection? No objection. Motion carries. Thank you. And we have a couple of revisions and corrections, C32 and C14. And then going to the consent. Items be pulled for the discussion by the board. Commissioner Wayne, any items be pulled by the consent?
None for me.
Commissioner Sandelli?
None.
Commissioner Hammond?
I have none.
Commissioner Greenwald?
Yes, Chairman, I would like to pull item 14. I am abstaining from voting on consent agenda number 14, approved change order for neighborhood stabilization program property. Due to the conflict of interest, I am a minority owner in Big League Builders Incorporated, a company that was selected for a construction project that public bid on August 25th, 2021. I will file the Form 8B, memorandum of voting conflict for county, municipal, and other local public officers with the minutes office.
Great. Thank you, sir. Item 14 has been pulled. If I could get a motion for the balance.
So moved.
We have a motion for the balance. And a second?
I'll second that.
Second. Any public comment on the consent agenda other than 14? Come back to the board. Any objections to the balance? No objection. Okay. Item 14. Bring that up for a motion and a second.
Just give him a minute to, there you go. I think you wanted to step into the hallway. Okay. Mr. Chairman, seeing as item 14 is a project in North Fort Myers, I'll move approval of the item.
Okay. We have a motion. Second. We have a second. Commissioner Sandelli. Any public comment on item number 14? Come back with the board for any other discussion. Any objection? No objection. Motion carries. Consent agenda is done. Thank you. Move on to the administrative agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
item number 32, please. You've been pulled from consent.
I'm sorry.
I apologize. No, I've been moved to administrative.
Sorry.
My mistake.
Did I miss something? Okay.
Well, on the recap, we moved 32 to
Yeah.
the administrative agenda. So we can take that up first if you want.
Yeah. Go ahead. 32.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 32, we're asking you to approve a waiver of an ordinance for this, for Southeast County Force Main Improvement Design Services, and would like Ms. Keys to present the item, please.
Morning, Pam.
Hey, good morning. Pam Keys, Utility Director. This item requests approval of a waiver to allow Johnson Engineering to submit a proposal for design services for our utilities project. Johnson Engineering completed 2 planning studies back in 2016, also 2021, and those studies will be part of the advertisement package, so everybody gets the same information.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this time?
Well, I had one question, Commissioner Pendergrass, if I may. For our county manager, we do these waivers a lot. Did you have any thoughts on if that ordinance 9222 is still applicable today, or if it needs another look to see if you know, this waiver process really makes sense?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Roger.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, this, I don't recall the year that this ordinance was created, and at the time, it really did seem necessary. We had contractors that were doing design work and then bidding the projects, and, you know, but it was during a time when we had some difficulties in Lee County. Today, though, our issue is that we have fewer and fewer of these contractors that are bidding the design work because what they really want to bid is the project work. And so we're seeing fewer and fewer companies available to do the design work. And you know, we really feel like the ordinance could be amended if you so choose to sunset the ordinance as no longer needed. You'll see over the last couple of years, we've probably asked you for waivers 4 or 5 times on these projects, and it just makes good sense to have today, with the complexity of these projects, have the same company that designs the project be able to compete to actually build the project as well.
That was thank you, Mr. County Manager. Yeah, that was my question. I know we see these waivers a lot, I mean, I don't know what the amendment to the ordinance would look like, but you know, I'm willing to move approval for this item today, and then also ask staff to bring us back in the future just options or their recommendation on if the ordinance needs to be amended, that ordinance 9222, so that, you know, if it's less paperwork and bureaucracy that we can save, then I'm all about streamlining the process. So, yeah.
So your motion is to approve the item with direction for staff to come back with the updating the ordinance from 1992.
Yeah, recommend that recommendation to update that ordinance from 1992, correct.
I'll second that. Any other discussions? Any public comment on this item, number 32? Come back to the board. Any objection? No objection. Motion carries. Thank you. Administrative 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administrative item number 1. turn back the page. We're asking you to approve the updated building permit fee schedule today. We'd ask Mr. Morris to present the item.
Good morning, Commissioners. As the County Manager suggested, Administrative Agenda Item Number 1 seeks Board approval of a resolution to amend the county's current building permit fees and update the associated fee schedule. It's been over 20 years since our building permit fees were last comprehensively studied and updated, and at the urging and support of the local building industry, staff in the county engaged a consultant to conduct a study and make recommendations for fee adjustments with two goals. One, setting fees that better match the actual cost of providing the service, and two, help minimize the future buildup of the building permit fee reserves. The results of the consultant review were scrutinized by staff and the Building Industry Oversight Committee, the BIOC, with some adjustments made for consistency purposes across permit types. The Building Industry Oversight Committee made a motion at its February 10th, 2022 meeting to support the new fee structure. Just some background, Lee County currently has 169 types of fees related to the processing, reviewing, and inspection of building permits. Of those, 46 have been recommended for a fee reduction, 28% would see a fee increase, and 26 would remain unchanged. The most significant reductions are to commercial permit fees. The board must approve any changes to the community development fees and the external fees manual. The new fee structure will go into effect 90 days after board action. Gentlemen, Mr. Sean McNulty, the county's chief building official, is available for any questions you might have on this item.
Any questions for staff at this time?
I do.
Yep. Commissioner Wayne?
Sean, if you can come on up. Appreciate the thorough review yesterday. Just a little, for the record, just some of the challenges you have specifically with the building fund balance that we have, the reserves. I mean, obviously there's a concern. It's very restricted in how we can spend it, you know, and obviously I know that you reduce fees. Do you anticipate that with these changes that fund balance will continue to go down?
Morning, Commissioners. Sean McNulty with DCD. To answer your question, yes. Between the previously approved spending that the board approved in 2020, the continued 25% fee reduction, and this now correction to our fee schedule, we believe we are on track to get the fund balance to a level that brings us into compliance with the requirements.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I just, having known it all too well, having governed in Sanibel, it's a very restrictive fund that you all have, and you're not allowed to use it for any other purpose. So I'd imagine these fees, many of the fees that were reduced, that was a consideration you all had to obviously further impact, and, you know, not only did the board reduce the, you know, it by 25%, but it enabled us with the reserve balances we have to probably lower some of these fees, or many of the fees we're lowering on the schedule. Is that a fair assumption?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for staff at this time?
You know, one question I had for staff that we talked about during my briefing that I think we should talk about here too was the 25% fee reduction across the board. So what we're going to do today when we approve this action is we're going to set the new fee schedule, and then that new fee schedule will then be reduced by 25% when the folks actually pay for those permits or those fees, right? Is that?
That is correct. The 25% discount expires in November 30th, I believe. If approved, the new fee schedule will go into effect 90 days after your approval. But right now, there's no plans to change the 25% discount. But yes, it would. The 25% discount would apply to whatever the current fees are, including the reduced, this new fee schedule.
So you mentioned the 25% discount renew or expires in November. Do you anticipate bringing that back to the board at that time to review whether or not we would renew that 25% discount?
I don't necessarily have a recommendation yet, but we're looking at it very closely. We'll be watching it closely and make that decision when it comes closer to November.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. We've been having that conversation the last couple of days, and we're pretty close to wanting to make a recommendation to you, and it sounds like we're going to ask you to extend that 25% discount.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Greenwald? I'm sorry.
If I may, I just had one last point, and then absolutely happy to hand it off and apologize. Real quick, I guess the last point I wanted to make, just for anybody who's watching, who's trying to keep up real quick. So the problem that we have here is we have to have our reserves cannot get too big in this specific fund. Our budget for this fund is like approximately 14 million a year.
Our current budget is $14,399,947.
And our reserves are right around that same amount, correct?
They're about 228,000 over that.
Over that amount, okay. So we've got to bring that reserve down. Legally, we're required to bring that reserve down. And my question is, when we get to November and we look at that fee reduction, we may want to look at a fee reduction that gives us a little more cushion between the reserve number and where we legally are capped out on that, so that we have some capacity, some space there, as opposed to bumping right up against it. That's the point I wanted to make.
I mostly want to just ask a question for the record. How long has it been since we addressed the fees for the permits? How long has it been since we made any changes to that, approximately?
Any major changes, I believe, was 2002.
Oh, so a long time ago.
Yeah, yes, it's been a long time.
Thank you. Commissioner Roy?
So the challenge, and I think Commissioner Hammond started to really drill down on this, the challenge, we experienced in Sanibel was the same thing. It's an enterprise fund. It's very restrictive to building. It can only be that way. And as that continues to fund, you're limited by what you could do. So we as commissioners say, okay, great. If the fund's growing too big, should we reduce the income that's coming in the door and reduce the fees? It allows us an opportunity to do two things. We pass along the cost to the taxpayers, and we get to reduce the fund balance. And, we got to a point in Sanibel, we had to go down to 50% because it continued to grow. And there's nothing I can do because you get to a certain level and it really becomes unhealthy. It's just you have very restrictions. And if I'm saying anything wrong, Pete, hop in. But you have very restricted uses of that money. It's very detailed in the statute.
Thank you. I just want to say I think it's a great thing we can do here for reducing. Maybe in the future we could look at reducing the number greater, like Commissioner Wayne said. One time they did up to 50%, because it's putting money back in the consumer's pocket. So many things people think it goes back to the builder. At the end of the day, this costs housing. One of the biggest problems now is affordable housing, and this is another cost factor in that. So we need to reduce that cost any way we can. So this definitely would help the consumers. Any other comments or anything?
No, first of all, I appreciate all the work that's been done, and I always get pleased when I see the public sector and the private sector work together. It benefits both, and in the end, it's the consumer. So thanks for not doing this in a vacuum. Thank you for doing it with interface with the folks that we're dealing with. Hope up everybody. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Any public comment on item 1? Come back to the board after public comment for a motion.
I'll happily move the item.
We have a motion, and we have a second. Any other discussion? Any objection? No objection. Motion carries. Item number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 2 has been deferred for 3 weeks.
Okay. Do we need a motion on that, Richard?
Mr. Chairman, you handled that as part of the motion on.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, thank you. Item number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 3, we're asking you to award contract for new shade structures at multiple Lee County parks, and would ask Mr. Lavender to make the presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. Item number 3 on the administrative agenda is the final project during this fiscal year for the shade initiative that began during last year's budget discussions. This contract with Industrial Shade Sports will bring shade to Boca Grande, Charleston Park, Harlem Heights, Lehigh Acres Community Park, Manatee Park, Mary Moody Park, Olga Park, Ruttenberg, Three Oaks, and Veterans Park. One item of note, up to this point, we've shaded 7 different playgrounds at 7 different parks. This contract will address shading 2 of our ball field common areas, one being at Lehigh Acres Community Park, the other being at Three Oaks Park. And by the end of this fiscal year, you will have taken care of 17 of our parks.
Wow.
Thank you.
Move approval, Mr. Chairman, gladly.
I'll second the motion. Who was the second? We have a second, Commissioner Greenwald. Any questions for staff? Good. Any public comment on item number 3? Okay. We'll come back to the board for Any objection? No objection, motion carries. Thank you. Public hearing 1. Morning.
Morning. Good morning, Commissioners. David Halverson, County Attorney's Office. Earlier this morning, the board continued public hearing item 2 to the September 6th agenda. So this item 1 is the only public hearing for today. So with that, item number 1 is a motion to adopt an ordinance amending the Lee County Solid Waste MSBU/MSTU ordinance. This amendment will convert the city of Cape Coral from an MSTU to an MSBU for purposes of assessing costs for the operation and maintenance of several waste disposal and management facilities. This amendment will not affect overall costs. It will only change the method of assessment. This has been duly advertised, and I've provided the affidavit of publication to the clerk. If there's any questions, staff's available.
Any questions for staff at this time? Okay. We'll go public comment on public hearing 1. Any public comment? We'll come back to the board. There's no public comment.
Move the item.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any other discussion? Any objection? No objection. Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I might, just with regard to the second public hearing, procedurally, if you could open that public hearing and then entertain a motion to continue it until the September 6th meeting at 9:30 a.m., we would appreciate that.
Great. Okay, public hearing number 2 at this time. We'll reduce that. And you need a motion for that, or we already took care of that?
If we could open the public hearing, entertain a motion, close the public hearing, then vote the motion. Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we need to call public comment?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Enter public comment on item number 2. We'll come back to the board for a motion to defer to September.
Make the motion to
6th.
defer to September 6th.
We have a motion? Second. We have a second, Commissioner Sandelli. Any other discussion? Any objection? No objection. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Got no walk-ons. Commissioner items. Commissioner Wayne.
I don't have a commissioner item.
Okay. Commissioner Sandelli? No. Commissioner Hammond?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have one commissioner item, just information and notice to you guys about what's coming up. The Florida Association of Counties has their Innovation and Policy Conference in September from the 14th through the 16th. This year, the president of FAC has appointed me the chairman of the Water and Environmental Sustainability Committee. So we'll be able to take some of the water policy proposals that we've developed here at the commission to the committee at FAC and hopefully get those passed and then have FAC's advocacy go behind them at the state level. 2 of the proposals our staff has talked about relate to, they're calling it FIBs, fecal indicator bacteria. There's supposedly rulemaking that the Department of Environmental Protection is looking at right now that would basically put a TMDL on these fecal indicator bacteria, meaning we would need to adopt some best management practices and things like that to try and lower these bacteria. Well, our staff has said that right now that's very hard to do because we don't know what the sources are of those. And so we want to make sure that as that rule is developed, it's developed in a way that doesn't harm Lee County or any of the other 67 counties. And then the other one we were going to talk about that our staff has recommended is relates to that Big Cypress Basin and the problem there that we have where we've got taxpayers that are scientifically in the Big Cypress Basin, but their money's going to the Lake Okeechobee Basin. And so those are the 2 things. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to miss the West Coast Inland Navigation District's second budget hearing. Commissioner Ruane has graciously accepted that opportunity to fill in for me. And then I will also miss the Metropolitan Planning Organization's meeting that Friday morning, the 16th, because of my attendance at FAC. So just wanted to give you that notice and heads up. And I wish they would have scheduled it differently, but that's how it fell this time.
It's hard to schedule everything. I know probably a few of us may be, for this FAC meetings, we're going to have conflicts no matter what. So congratulations on that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I have one item I want to bring up. This happens like once or twice every year. We've seen it throughout some of us has been here for a while. I've seen it a lot. Commissioner Hamby, we had this issue last year and the year before in Fort Myers when the city of Fort Myers was looking to annex into the North Fort Myers area, the marina over there in the county. We were trying to purchase the property to keep the annexation from happening. We've seen a couple years before that with the city of Cape Coral trying to annex property onto Matlacha and Pine Island into the city of Cape Coral. So I like to bring up somehow we can look as, and recently we just had this issue with the city of Fort Myers annexing some property off of Daniels Parkway, which was not consistent with what the county's been planning in that whole Diamond Enterprise zone for the last 30 years there in that corridor. So I'd like for us is have a motion to direct staff to look into, see how we can identify areas of the county that's unincorporated that chooses not to be part of a city, and to see how we can, staff can approach the property owners or what we can do internally to make it not inviting for someone to do it. Why would somebody take a piece of land and voluntarily annex into a city knowing their taxes be 4 times higher, their utilities be 4 times higher, the impact fees would be double the price? Why do they do that for? And, so we need to find out why people would voluntarily take property and do that. We're seeing this across the county. We're going to continue to see this as the cities meet. They're obviously organizing throughout the state to try to increase their boundaries of the cities, and I understand the reason why they do it, but we have our residents that are unincorporated in the county, like, for example, in Alva, I don't think they'd be happy but turn into the city of Fort Myers or Cape Coral. We've seen that happen with Matlacha. Nothing against the cities, but the people choose to live in areas that are unincorporated. They don't choose to have those boundaries moved upon them, and those I guess the violations they feel like they've been violated because new people are coming in. For example, this recent project on Daniels Parkway, this whole area has been commercial, trade port, and all of a sudden you're going to try to dump 800 to 1,200 apartments in the middle of that, and the people in that surrounding area it's not compatible, it's not consistent with good planning, it's not consistent with what we're doing here in Lee County as far as long-range planning. And we need housing, but we need housing in the right place. And the change in areas geographically, just because you're going to impose your fees or boundaries or your taxations, political or taxation on people, I don't think we should be trying to do what we can throughout the county to protect all the citizens in Lee County. We're going to continue to see it with Matlacha area, Pine Island, North Fort Myers is probably going to come back up again, even in South Lee County. So if we could, we could make a motion to direct staff to look into what we can do internally to address the cities trying to incorporate unincorporated areas. Roger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, the issue of annexation, has been around for many, many years. In a former life, when I was working on the East Coast, worked for a county where there was 27 cities at the time. And over the years, so much land was annexed into those cities that only 3% of the county was unincorporated areas. So that drives the cost of service through the ceiling, because you've got a small area, but you still have to provide the same level of service as you had for the large area. And so the geography makes it very difficult to provide service. So it's not the kind of thing that happens overnight, but it'll sure sneak up on you. And sometimes annexation makes sense, but very often it does not. And so this is an opportunity we'd like to work with you to see if we can't craft some policy that'll be helpful.
And like Roger said, it kind of creeps up on you. I'm meeting with a property owner in a few weeks where they have, I think, 20 or 40 acres down off of Metro, and they're looking at annexing. It's concurrent with the city now. They want to annex into the city as raw vacant property, so voluntarily annex them. But why would you do that? And hearing the reasons why they would do that is very disturbing, why they choose to go to the city, even though they're going to be paying 4 times the higher fees, 4 times more taxes, utilities, the reason why they would do that. So what we can do internally to prevent that from happening. Why should they do that? Because basically they're going to build the property and sell it the next day for entitlements, and then somebody else is stuck with that burden, and people move there not knowing the water bills will be 3 times as high, their taxes will be 4 times as high, and they don't realize they're within a certain geographical area. So it slowly, like Roger says, 20 acres here, 80 acres here, 64 acres here, and before you know it, and there's not much left of the county. Kevin?
Sure, thanks, I appreciate it. Roger and I are going to meet with Cape Coral next week. This issue is coming fast and hard. I think there's multiple issues with this, but annexation, people hear the word voluntary. Everybody's for it. Don't understand the complexities associated with it. Yes, you're right, Pine Island is an issue. Where we have, and the developer's already made a decision, and now he wants to hook into the local water. It's through our interlocal. It doesn't make sense to us. You then they're approaching a local fire station. Cape Coral wants to buy the fire station. They don't want to sell. Perhaps maybe we could also go one step further as we meet with the municipalities. There is certainly a push in Cape Coral to certainly go to more annexation. City manager certainly said that. I just think we need to talk about the ramifications of what that means. And because people hear the word voluntary, I think, well, it's great. Okay, well, you know, everybody's for this. No one's really thought about the ramifications, and I hope that our meeting is to try to talk to Cape Coral to be proactive in, you know, let's work together if there's a particular issue. And what are the repercussions when you basically say out the public and you misguide the developer, and then I can't get you any hookup to water, or I can't find that. So you now purchased some rights without the ability for basic services. So I'm also trying to make sure that, you know, we educate the cities. There's a big turnover in them, and it's happened the most that I've come across with Cape Coral. I mean, you know, I've had 3 or 4 homeowner groups I had to go out and talk to. The anxiety levels were off the charts, you know, and it just came up. And, you know, it has been said at the city council meeting, there's a desire to certainly go to more annexation. And, you know, Roger and I are going to be proactive in trying to just sit down, so understand what their thought process is, understand the repercussions and the, you know obviously collateral damage that may occur that you haven't even thought of. So before we go out and try to do this and encourage this, you know, I just think we need to really, you know, look at this many ways, because the word voluntary annexation is almost an oxymoron when you really come down to looking at it, because it doesn't work as easily as you might think.
That's why I brought this up, because I was hoping we could be more, you know, be more organized. Because, like, for example, wasn't aware until you just told us this now about the Cape Coral issue. And if I, you know, didn't do the letters the last few months about the city issue up at Daniels, you know, if we're not communicating that, they're running that stuff through their agendas really fast. And we need to be organized. We need to have staff monitoring their agendas to see what's coming forward. And we need to identify those areas and approach them. Because, for example, I will just give you an update for the city of Mars. They had a council meeting last night. I went there and spoke. That vote fell 3-3 to advertise for rezoning for that 64 acres or the 44 acres off of Daniels Parkway for the 800 apartments. So the council still wanting to do it to a certain point. You had a tied vote, 3-3. It was only 6 council people there. But I just know from talking to city staff and everything, they're going to continue doing this. It will come back up. Even though it failed their zoning board, they don't have water access and they don't have road access, they're still going to do it because they want the entitlements for the seller who wants to buy it, and then the buyer wants to buy it for the entitlements for more units. And the cities, in that case, is promising people, we'll increase your density 1,000% if you come to the city, not the county. And they see that, and they're just going to flip it to some hedge fund or somebody investor the next day. And then we're stuck with the infrastructure, we're stuck with the water issues, and we're stuck with the transportation. But if we're not organized together and monitoring this county-wide, this is going to continue to happen piece by piece, and we see the results of it then.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. Instead of looking at agendas, you know, my approach was just let's sit down with the city, because it's happened 3 or 4 times already. And maybe as we go along the process, you do it in Fort Myers and try to identify some of the issues so we understand and try to nip it before it gets to us, before it gets on an agenda. I'm trying to avoid that situation because it gives great anxiety, and honestly, all you need to do is get 20 or 30 phone calls and people are just like, what do you mean I'm not going to be part of it? What does it mean? And they're confused and they're emotional, and I get it. You know, so hopefully we have a productive meeting and talk about, you know, the ramifications of annexation and what that means. You know, we're meeting next week with the city of Cape Coral, you know, both the mayor and the city manager.
I understand that. I agree with that method, but when you have the city being staff-driven and management being told this is what we're going to do, even without our discussion, and then elected body accepting that, and the manager telling staff, you will go out there and you will provide these entitlement promises to the property owners to go if they sell the property and, you know, annexation to the city. How do you combat that? You know, and I don't think us asking them not to do that is going to stop them. I wish it would, but
well, I think you talk about the ramifications of, you know, we have an interlocal with Pine Island Water, and by the way, they're not looking to modify it, so you don't have water. I mean, it comes down to some just basic issues you talk about, and you know, in my particular case with Pine Island, there's not an ability to modify unless we want to. We modify the actual agreement. I'd have to ask an outside party to modify it for me when I'm not in favor of it to begin with. So why would I modify? And water is a basic necessity. I think the developers down the road are already thinking they're developing, and they don't have access to water. How do you do that? What do you develop?
The city case last night, they don't have permits, DP will not give them access to drinking water, they're still gonna approve that zoning for 800 units with no water and no access to roads. Knowing they're gonna get it in the future, hoping bonding will come through and they'll get extra wells online, but probably won't happen, but that's the challenges we have. Roger, what would you like to see from staff level, since you're obviously working with this with Commissioner Wayne, and in the past, Commissioner Hammond worked with you, the No Fort Myers issue, what would help you with staff we could review or have some type of policy in place so we could address these issues?
Commissioners, thanks, Mr. Chair. We need to work with the county attorney's office so that we clearly understand annexation law, because there's voluntary and involuntary annexation opportunities for the cities. And in an environment like we have now, with the rapid growth and increase in property values based on these high-value developments, that's when property becomes most attractive for a city, and it's pretty simple. They begin to pick up the pace on annexation efforts based on property values because it adds to their general fund, through ad valorem contribution. And in many cases, the property values begin to increase before build out, and because all the infrastructure is new, very little service is required, and so it becomes, and I say with respect, a cash cow. And so the more we grow, the more these annexations we're going to see. So we need to work with the attorney's office to make sure we understand annexation law very well. We'll get the right staff together to talk about what we think some policy conversations should sound like, and then we'll come back to you for workshop.
Okay, thank you. Richard, do you have any?
If that works.
Mr. Chairman, as I understand the board's discussion, your focus is largely twofold. One, for staff to perhaps analyze those factors that make properties attractive for annexation and see if there are any internal impediments that can be overcome or modified. And then also to direct staff to develop a relationship, perhaps leading to an interlocal agreement with the municipalities as to how annexation is going to occur going forward. And part of that interlocal should be identifying those factors that both you and all the commissioners have spoken about, and that is, how are two governments going to work together to provide essential services to areas that either should be annexed or should not be annexed because of the lack of those services. So I see it twofold. One, an analysis of internal impediments that lead to annexation, and then also a larger discussion policy-wise that could lead to interlocal agreements with the various municipalities as to annexation criteria and identifying those areas that are ripe for annexation and who's going to furnish essential services and when. I don't know if I muddied the water or clarified, but.
Well, I just want, one thing we all can identify, one thing it will be, these properties like that we were referring to in the Cape, I'm sure they're vacant properties because no one in their right mind, like Mark here from Miramar Lakes and Danny and his group here from North Mars, no one with property that's being inhabited will actually come forward and say, I want to involuntarily annex my community or my house into the city and be under their regulations. What we're going to deal with is this is mostly vacant land, unplotted land. They usually come in for a zoning change that's basically they're just going to flip it and then set the entitlements. And that's their trouble, is trying to, when you identify those vacant lands, that's what they're coming in for.
And Mr. Chairman, perhaps by way of explanation, rather than me trying to verbalize it, the experience that you went through last evening in the city of Fort Myers and that particular piece of property, that's actually the poster child for what we're talking about. Here you had a voluntary annexation for the sole purpose of maximizing density with no regard to impacts on the county's transportation network or how water and sewer services were going to be provided to the site. That is the poster child for what we're talking about. That situation cries out for better communications and an agreement between the county and the city as to how those circumstances are going to be handled in the future. And then part of that also is perhaps taking a look at what drove that developer to seek annexation to begin with. And did they go in with eyes wide open?
Mr. Chair? Right. In the case of the annexation that you and Richard have been discussing, these developers are not local developers. These are guys from out of town.
They're absentee landlords. They're all from out of state. They're
Sure.
coming from
And
Georgia,
so-
Texas, wherever. They're going to come here and build the units and leave.
Well, part of their development strategy is to, maximize the number of dwelling units that they can build and sell. And if their higher densities are allowed in a city, they will actually make that a condition of sale of the property. They won't close until the annexation takes place, and they feel relatively assured that they're going to get the density they want. But as the county attorney says, it is very often without regard for infrastructure. And, on the Lee County side of the line, we provide water and transportation and all the things that, that we have to do. But you get to the city side, and they don't necessarily provide the same level of service. So eventually what happens, you get, months down the road, and we start getting these requests to supply water, to provide transportation infrastructure, and to become a partner, to the effort. And partner is just code for will you pay for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Sindelli.
It's always interesting to listen to these discussions because there's a lot of pieces to it. I always have to try to go back to something that's fundamental. Communication solves a lot of problems. And so when I think about this, if the staff can raise these issues as was suggested here and bring those to light, and then we can have that worked on relationship. You're bringing some fact to the table to the relationships that we're trying to establish. Okay, so sometimes it takes emotion out, we get back to the fact. And I think with that, we get to the ability to anticipate what the issues are going to be going forward as opposed to reacting. And if we can start collectively anticipating versus reacting, it takes out the anxiety that Commissioner Wayne talked about before. And that anxiety really comes from the people we represent. Make it clean, make it clear, put the facts on the table, develop the relationship, and make it a clean process.
Yeah, and if I could, I think the challenge also is, many municipalities have big turnover, so it's new people. Don't understand the ramifications of it, don't understand really how it is. And, you have a city manager indicating that we want to do many more annexations. I hear that and I'm like, what are you talking about? So sat down with staff, talked about it, picked the phone up, called the mayor, said, we need to talk. Because, in one breath, we're always getting accused of just growth. We don't care about growth. We're just going to just let it happen. And here's a direct example of exactly how growth really explodes. We take an area that, Pine Island, I'm getting calls constantly because they're just worried about their island. And all of a sudden it's going to flip to the city. And all of a sudden there's going to be X more additional, developments or property owners. And, all of a sudden, I'm like, and they did the deal. The deal's done. They didn't do the due diligence, so now they need water. I'm like, what do you want to do? Well, what about the developer? He should have done his due diligence before we had this conversation, not after the fact. So part of the challenge is just the elected body that changes hands as frequently. So I think if we could be proactive, sit down and grab the mayor and grab the city manager and try to start to have just a broad conversation about how do we work together as a county as a whole. Because, 60% of the cities represent, and then we're 40%, but we have more than 70% of the actual square miles in the county. So that's the challenge. And if you look at the square mileage, that's where the opportunities are. That's where you're going to have more density. And people, as it is, complain about density to begin with. We're trying to do things proactively, and people don't understand exactly what we're trying to do. This is a conversation where we're saying, stop. We don't want any more. Let's just understand the ramifications and educate people so we don't have a situation like this. But I think part of it is just looking at the turnover, being in this game for, this world, the political world for 16 years, just watching the turnover in municipalities. I'm sure Fort Myers is a byproduct of, look across the day, there's 3 or 4 brand new people.
Well, and that case, in your case, we're dealing with the new manager in Cape Coral, Roger, and I forgot his name, but he's from Broward County. So he came from an area of Broward County with 32 municipalities. So they welcome and embrace the larger city expansion when you have areas like that. So if you look at where they come from and the way they like to govern, and based upon taxation and their services they spend compared to their reserves compared to ours, if you see that, that's where you make up the difference. The problem is you talk to the mayor or 1 or 2 council people, unless we have a full consensus, the managers are still going to do what they want, especially in Fort Myers. They pretty much, it's hard to get four of them together in the council to make a motion to do something. And the managers say, hey, I can get this extra money from the city to do this, either in Cape Coral or the Fort Myers, and they're gonna say, we can get the extra tax base, we can spend it on these projects then. And that's how the managers entice the council to do it. And that's gonna be the challenge, is trying to get consensus of those, for that, because staff is still gonna be doing what the manager says at the end of the day. And it all comes back to that. We have to try though. So that's why today I wanted to talk about to see what we can do together to create a policy or give direction to our staff somehow to make sure we try to get ahead of this before it gets any bigger.
So having said all that, we're going to try to do a motion. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I just wanted to say there's not much that hasn't been said already. You guys certainly, I think, made amazing points today, and I'm supportive of getting together to have this conversation about what this policy may look like in regards to annexation. A couple other things to consider as we're preparing that policy is the folks in the fire districts in my district, like the North Fort Myers Fire District, for example, have come to me as well to talk about the effect that annexations have on their area and the areas that they cover, they serve, and what it does to their tax base as well. And so I think that could be something that also is part of that conversation. I think, what we see a lot around the edges of my, North Fort Myers, Cape Coral border is it's really about water and utilities and who's going to be the service provider. And so certainly that needs to be worked into the considerations as we talk about it. But yeah, I'm supportive of having this conversation because I don't think any of us want to get caught off guard with a controversial annexation that all of a sudden, like you mentioned, is just a bad situation for the residents, the people that we represent, and they want to know who's going to stand up for them. So.
Okay, thank you.
Great point.
Well, do you have any comments?
I think y'all pretty much covered everything. I've got quite the lesson here today.
Yeah, sorry to drag it out, but something that's going on for years. Like I said, this property on Daniels, the county stayed silent back in January where they annexed it in. It was a voluntary annexation. Obviously, we have no standing to object to it. But, this coming forward, though, I was surprised to see their zoning fell. They don't have water access, and still we're going to approve a zoning, going to public hearings to approve a zoning just because they want to get the entitlements. And, the people that own the property, the people that are selling the property, they know what they're doing. They hire a couple people that has a connection with the city council, and they get the votes to get stuff done before they know it. Even without water, without access, and without a zoning approval. I just couldn't imagine this board voting against, if the HACs did not recommend something, we voted against it to support it. We just don't do that. So I just hate to oppose that on the rest of the county residents throughout the county. We're seeing this, obviously. I'm learning today Commissioner Wayne's been actively involved in Cape Coral. So how do we work together to keep that from happening? So, Roger?
Mr. Chair, I've made it a habit for all the time I've been working for you not to editorialize, but on this topic, I'm going to tell you this may well be the most important policy conversation you all have while you're county commissioners.
Yes, for the future of Lee County, this is going to make a difference, 10, 20, 30 years from now. Because if we don't do this, the county will not look the same 10, 20 years from now.
So I'm going to try to make the motion.
Okay.
And it's going to have two folds to it. So I'd like for us to direct staff to obviously identify all the issues with involuntary and voluntary annexation and how they might affect Lee County. And then second, I'd like for us to attempt to try to have an interlocal agreement with the various cities so we have at least a working understanding in trying to develop a set document so there's an education component and an expectation component.
I second that.
Yeah.
Any public comment on this item? Yes. Iris? You have to come to the podium and state your name, sorry. Okay.
Thank you. Just in reference to what you had stated, including possibly the word of mitigating future risk of annexation. The word mitigation is truly important when it comes to trying to identify and find what is going on to be able to utilize it for the future. So you're trying to mitigate any issues in the future to be able to identify that. So I believe maybe using the word mitigate in that potentially, just because what you're trying to do before it becomes an issue.
think that's implied in what
There's no
what we're going to do. I think that it'll actually mitigate a lot of consequences.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to make sure there was like no ambiguity in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris.
You're welcome.
Danny? And Commissioner Evans, thanks for bringing up the fire department, because I didn't bring up South Charles, and other fire districts in South have approached me about the same thing.
Yes, sir. Danny Ballard, President of North Fort Myers Civic. This annexation thing is, you're right on track, but it's not always the undeveloped parcels. As we went, myself and Commissioner Hammond, and you was aware of it, the city of Fort Myers was trying to annex the river bottom to invoke taxes, but then that would also give them contiguous boundaries along the north shore of the river where they could then come in and take those other things through, quote, voluntary. Had a long, heated discussion with the mayor, and I told him, I said, number one, you can't provide fire protection because you got bridges that could prevent you from getting there. And I said, I will fight you, and I will go to every homeowner and tell them the difference between county service taxes and the city. And I said, it's almost 20-1. And he decided, and he didn't want to pursue that one. But it's not always undeveloped. There's other bigger issues that could be, because had they been able to do that, then they could have went in and taken all them houses that are really probably should be gone, but take and wipe them out and then put in a larger development, which would then impact the traffic and the roads and the utilities and everything. So it's not always just the undeveloped that they're after. It's sometimes a bigger picture. You got to look at it way down the road. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment? We'll come back to the board. We have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? Roger, thank you, and Richard, thanks for helping us with get through the process, and thanks for pointing out how important it is to the board and for the county, so thank you. Any objections to the motion? No objection, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any committee appointments? Commissioner Wayne, do you have any?
I do. I have one reappointment to the District Health Planning Council. It's Sharon Murphy.
Second.
A motion second. Any public comment? Reporting objection, no objection. Commissioner Sandelli, do you have any? No. Okay, I do not have any.
I have none this morning.
Commissioner Green? No? Okay.
Thank you, sir.
County manager items. Roger.
Nothing today, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. County attorney items.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have public presentation of matters concerning citizens. We have one card. Willie Joe Schottmeyer. Willie, try not to touch the microphone because it's already set, okay? Just don't touch, you don't have to touch the microphone. No, it's already set.
As you know, the need for affordable housing is, and I know we're working on that, but we don't have any emergency housing, and that's what my beef has been for a long time. The season is rainy out there. The church let people in early that I came from because of the rain. And I said, we need affordable emergency housing, like a youth hostel setting or something, that the nonprofits run, that would keep people off the streets in a safe environment until they get into, let's say, efficiencies, one bedrooms, families get into bigger housing. So that's something that we, I know that Destiny has contacted Roger from Human Services, and there is grant money out there. So working together, like I said, one person can't do it, even organization, but working together we can. So different places. You got homelessness in Lehigh. You got homelessness in North Fort Myers, where my friend here is at, and developing some base places to get them off the street, so they're not laying and people tripping on them at the stores or whatever until we get the other housing built, the portable units and that. So that's what I would like to talk to the Human Services and anybody else that can help us get that grant money. And fundraising too. We can do that. I put money from jobs I do, and I help a lot with the pantries, and anything I got is going into a fund, so to work together. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? Okay, we'll go to the workshop update. Roger, you have an update for the workshop today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This afternoon at 1:30, we will be workshopping with you what is labeled the final budget proposal for fiscal year 22-23. You gave us some instructions in our last workshop. We'll present the outcomes for those instructions, and then we'll be headed right into the public hearing next month.
Great, thank you. Any public comment on the workshop this afternoon? Okay, we'll come back to the board. Commissioner Greenwell, welcome again.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're having a good time.
I am, learning a lot.
Good luck next week, and thank you, and we'll be adjourned until 1:30 today.